I'll never forget the day it happened, right here in the shadowed recesses of Hillendale. A day that began like any other, yet gradually unraveled into a waking nightmare. I, Max Clayton, awoke with my usual resolve, indulging in my ancient stretches as the storm clouds loomed overhead, cloaking the sky in a bitter disquiet. The weather here is notoriously capricious, dark and brooding, a harbinger of the unease that often clung to this forsaken town. But I was determined. My early morning run would not be deterred. As I sprinted through the dilapidated streets, the old cliffside town exuded an aura of decay and despair, its houses standing as fragile sentinels, paint peeling like forgotten memories. The buildings sagged with weariness, mirroring the hollow stares of the locals who wandered about, lost in their own realms of desolation. Ironically, I had chosen this place for its seclusion, a refuge from the incessant noise of the world, a haven for my relentless training as I prepared for the 2028 Olympic Games. In the midst of my routine, I realized with a pang of annoyance that I had forgotten my water bottle. I decided to stop at a nearby shop, a ramshackle establishment that mainly catered to fishermen, but harbored a scant assortment of necessities. As I made my purchase, the air grew thick with a peculiar tension. My gaze fell upon a woman in the corner, tears streaming down her face like rain on a wind-battered shore. Her grief was palpable. Her daughter had vanished without a trace. Another one taken by the demons, the man behind the counter muttered with a rasping timbre. Initially, I dismissed his words as a morbid jest, but as I exited, passing the weeping mother posting pictures of her lost daughter, a chill skittered down my spine. The girl's name, Brenda, echoed in my mind, an unsettling chord strummed in my consciousness. As I continued my run, each step through the twisted alleys felt like a descent into a waking dream, an uncanny realm where the townsfolk moved like marionettes, their vacant expressions betraying a shared knowledge, a connection to some dark mystery. They didn't seem entirely present, as if some insidious force had reached into their minds and plucked away their will, leaving only shadows where once there had been life. My heart raced, not from exertion, but from a growing awareness that something was definitely off about this town. And though I initially dismissed it as mere unease, an insidious sensation crept over me, an unfaltering awareness that I was not alone. That's when I first saw her, a gothic figure draped in black, her skin a pallid white that seemed to absorb the light around her. She was undeniably beautiful, yet an unsettling malevolence clung to her like an afterthought, manifesting in the chilling smirk that curled upon her lips. It struck me as disquieting, and I realized, with a jolt, that this was not the first encounter I'd had with her. Last week, while indulging in a solitary meal at the local pub, I glimpsed her lurking outside. Her gaze was fixed upon me, unblinking, unwavering, a predatory intensity that draped over the atmosphere. I could feel the weight of her stare, heavy and oppressive, with that sinister grin etched into her features. Just the thought of it made my heart freeze in terror. The locals whispered of her origins, claiming she hailed from the town's wealthiest lineage, a family so steeped in history that it was said her ancestors forged this very place from the earth. Despite the distance, I could sense her presence trailing behind me, an echo of dread that intensified with each hurried step I took. It felt surreal, as if I were caught in a nightmare where I was running, yet going nowhere, ensnared in an endless loop of her watchful gaze. The very air grew thick with the promise of something darker, a creeping certainty that I was being hunted by a specter woven from the fabric of fear itself. The next moment, I found myself outside the town, poised to embark on the hiking trail I frequented each morning, a path that wound through a realm of unsettling beauty, leading straight to the lighthouse on the far side of the island. I could have taken the quicker route through the town, but such a choice would have betrayed the essence of my training. As I ran, a creeping unease began to wash over me, for the trail was disturbingly silent. An oppressive quiet hung in the air, a silence so profound that even the rustling branches of the ancient trees remained still, and the waves, which typically roared beneath the cliffs, were muted, as if silenced by some unseen force. I ascended, now about 40 feet high, feeling an inexplicable tension coiling within me like a serpent ready to strike. Then I saw it, a flash of crimson that sliced through the monochrome landscape, a red ribbon dangling ominously from the gnarled branch of a tree just at the edge of the precipice. My blood ran cold as recognition gripped my mind. I had seen this ribbon before. It was the very accessory that adorned Brenda's hair in that fateful photograph, now imbued with a sinister presence. A dreadful chill swept through me, and for a moment I stood entranced, caught between the mundanity of my training and the dawning horror of what the silent woods concealed. With a grim sense of duty, I resolved to retrieve the ribbon, an artifact of poignant significance. I began to ascend the gnarled eldritch tree that loomed over the abyss, its twisted limbs seeming almost sentient in their malevolence. The likelihood of finding the girl was slim, but perhaps this ribbon might serve as a beacon of solace for her grieving mother, and a starting point for the authorities. As I ventured out onto the precarious branch, a pervasive unease settled over me. The wind whispered malevolently, but beneath its ceaseless howl there was something more. A voice, ethereal and inscrutable. It wove a sinister melody that struck a chord of dread deep within my soul. The very fabric of reality seemed to tremble with each spectral note. Suddenly, a blinding flash of white light tore through the gloom. A bolt of lightning had struck the branch, and I felt my tenuous grip on the world slip away. Time seemed to stretch and distort as I tumbled through the void. The last image that seared itself into my consciousness was a figure standing with a diabolical grin. Had she wrought this calamity upon me? Then oblivion took me, and I plunged into darkness, landing with a bone-jarring impact on a smooth boulder. When I awoke, fortune had spared me in part, but I had not escaped unscathed. The fall had spared my head, but my left leg was shattered, a grotesque testament to my misfortune. The pain was a relentless, throbbing companion, and I knew that without swift assistance, my days of running would be forever lost. Desperately, I reached for my smartphone, only to find it ruined, its shattered remnants lying amongst the jagged rocks. I was ensnared, trapped at the nadir of the cliff, with nothing but the vast, unforgiving ocean stretching out before me. I attempted to pull myself up, every movement a struggle against the inescapable weight of despair. I lay immobile, ensnared by the crushing weight of my own impotence. My attempts to scream were swallowed by the cacophony of the waves crashing against the cliffside, each thunderous roar dousing me with briny despair. The rain added its own sinister rhythm, a malevolent symphony that drowned out any hope of rescue. As the ocean waves engulfed me like a dark, sentient abyss, a new terror gripped my mind. The tide was rising, creeping inexorably closer. With desperate resolve, I grasped at the most solid stone within reach, clawing my way upward with my uninjured leg. Each movement was a battle against the overwhelming fatigue that sought to claim me. Salt water filled my mouth, choking me as I reached for my water bottle, only to be met with abject horror. It was gone. Frantically, my eyes scoured the tumultuous surf, only to see it being swept away by the merciless tide, too far to retrieve. My shattered leg rendered swimming an impossibility. A primal scream tore from my throat, mingling with the storm's wrath. Dehydration and exhaustion would be my executioners under the relentless sun. All this for a ribbon. The cruel irony of my fate gnawed at me. The day grew hotter, the humidity oppressive even beneath the storm-laden sky. In a desperate bid for survival, I gathered rocks, arranging them in a feeble attempt to shield myself from the blistering heat. Yet deep within, I knew it was futile, a mere postponement of the inevitable descent into madness and death. Hours passed, and night descended upon me like an encroaching shadow. Though the sun's merciless glare had abated, a new torment began as the bitter cold set in. The freezing air and the relentless icy waves struck my sunburned flesh like knives, each splash of salt water a fresh torture. As exhaustion claimed me, I drifted into a restless, fitful sleep, only to be jolted awake by a sharp, agonizing sensation in my broken leg. At first I thought it was the sting of the salt water, but then my eyes widened in horror. I was covered in small crabs, their claws scraping and tearing at my flesh. A primal fury surged through me, and I began to smash the crabs one by one, consuming them in a frenzied, animalistic rage. My roars echoed into the night, blending with the howls of the wind and the crashing waves. But then, a movement caught my eye. A shadowy figure flitted at the edge of my vision, disappearing into the darkness. A splash followed, and I saw ripples in the ocean, as if something had just submerged. Cowering against a rock, I clung to it like a lifeline. The tide crept closer, its icy touch forcing sleep to elude me. When dawn broke, the early sun's warmth only served to aggravate my already blistered skin. I screamed for help until my voice was raw, but the vast, indifferent ocean swallowed my cries. Under the increasing heat of the sun, my mind began to unravel. Delirium took hold, and the world around me twisted into a nightmarish vortex. The next time I regained consciousness, I saw the goth girl from before, her wicked smile a grotesque beacon of terror. I wanted to scream, but all I could manage was a maniacal laugh. Was she real, or merely a figment of my fevered imagination? Another wave crashed over me, snapping me back to reality. To my astonishment, I saw my water bottle beside me, miraculously washed back by the tide. I seized it and drank deeply. Nothing had ever tasted so pure. For a fleeting moment, hope stirred within me. But my relief was short-lived. I sensed movement in the water, my heart sinking as something approached. I concealed myself as best I could among the rocks, peering out to see the creature from the night before. This time, it was not alone. Watery, mane-like appendages and humanoid forms, covered in shimmering scales, emerged from the depths. They moved with an eerie, smoke-like grace, and I felt my sanity slipping away. Clinging to the rocks, I closed my eyes, praying they would leave. I could hear them communing with each other. It was a kind of language one could go mad. Hearing, I couldn't make out a word of it, except one sentence. "I'll do my best, replicate it for the creatures," said Jata, Jauluangva, Hedarcephalus. Eventually, I heard them dive away, but their presence lingered in my thoughts, as well as that word, Hedarcephalus. The memory of the man at the convenience store, speaking of demons, haunted me. Could it be true? Were these beings from the depths of the ocean, demons hiding among us? I realized that I had to escape, or I would be destroyed. Desperation drove me to search for anything that could aid my escape. I found the strong vines, Ipomoea pescaprai and Ipomoea coccinea, and fashioned a brace for my leg. Though still painful, I could now stand and walk a little. Summoning all my courage and strength, and with only one good leg, I began the arduous climb up the cliffside. My life depended on it. I climbed desperately, each push sending shards of agony through my shattered leg, but I fought through the pain. Higher and higher I ascended, fully aware that every torturous step increased the likelihood that my leg would have to be removed should I survive. Yet, the thought of mundane races no longer plagued my mind. All I craved was escape from this fate. I clawed my way up the cliff for what felt like an eternity, a cold dread settling over me as I realized the hours had slipped by unnoticed. Why wasn't I free yet? Glancing down, I saw the creatures lurking below, their malevolent eyes gleaming in anticipation, waiting for me to fall. I was nothing more than a morsel of flesh to them. As I looked up, horror seized my heart. The cliff seemed to have grown taller, transforming into a malevolent mountain. This defied all reason. Cliffs did not change their height. It was as if the rock itself was alive, exuding a dark aura that twisted my perception of reality. Was I still at the bottom, trapped in some endless nightmare meant to claim my sanity and soul? I resolved to fight back, climbing with a defiant vigor against this world. The dark storm raged, waves growing more violent, as if the realm itself sought to thwart my escape. An ominous sound rose from the ocean, a sound so chilling that everything else I had endured seemed trivial. A colossal wave loomed before me, its approach heralded by a pair of glowing, menacing yellow eyes. As the monstrosity drew nearer, its grotesque face, formed of seawater, became discernible. It was a titan, a living wave with a gaping maw, ready to swallow me whole into the abyss. Was this the fate that had befallen little Brenda? As the behemoth bore down, I realized I was about to share her doom. The name of the creature echoed in my mind, as if I had always known it. Heterocephalus. The Titan's wrath engulfed me, plunging me into the dark abyss. I found myself adrift in the vast cosmos, the universe unfolding before me in a sight both beautiful and horrific. Nebulae swirled around me, a sight too magnificent for any mortal to behold. The horror seeped into my soul, and my sanity slipped away once more. I laughed maniacally, standing on the ledge of some ancient alien civilization, another planet perhaps, or the remnants of a world devoured by an unstoppable darkness. The city was adrift in space, indistinguishable from the surrounding void. In the endless darkness, I saw what I first thought were two bright stars. Realization dawned with a rush of fear. They were eyes, fixated on me. I felt faint and toppled from the ledge, falling endlessly into the cosmic abyss. Suddenly, I awoke in a local hospital, saved by a passerby on the trail. My life had been spared, but my raving about the horrors I had seen continued. The doctors informed me that I had been in a coma for the past month, attributing my visions to sun exposure and deprivation of food, water, and sleep. Horrified, I discovered my shattered leg had been amputated. I spent 2 more months in the hospital, haunted by dreams of the terrifying events. Despite the doctor's assurances, I knew those entities were real. Their presence lingered, watching, waiting to finish what they started. Strangely, I began to welcome the thought of their return. Sometimes, I revisit the place where I encountered the horrors, hoping they will take me with them next time. Brenda's body was found adrift outside of town while I was hospitalized. I smiled at the thought. She was dead and free, while the rest of humanity remained trapped within this mundane existence. Even when news of my ordeal reached global media and I was invited to the Olympics, I did not attend. It all seemed so trivial, these self-absorbed fools oblivious to the insignificance of their actions. We are nothing, less than nothing, and it is a beautiful truth. No matter how far humanity ventures into space, it cannot escape the horrors that await. Our minds are simply unequipped to handle it. The darkness I witnessed is approaching our world, an unstoppable force. As I return to the shoreline, I await Hedocephalus, ready to be claimed and freed from mankind's cursed fate.